Right, so thanks again for the invitation to tell a little bit about the 18 years in which I was the head of the department. When giving such a talk, there is a temptation for self-indulgence, but I'll try and be as factual as I can whilst not too boring. Any rendition of history can, of course, reflect a personal bias, but again, I will try to be objective as I can. Now, over the years, I've learnt as a Monash lecturer that you must state up front what your learning objectives are. And for this talk, as you see, they are to develop an understanding of what the department was like in 1992, to appreciate the evolution of the department and to find the old medical school. And at the end of the talk, it's to be sufficiently informed to undertake a multiple choice examination. Now, my first memories of the department were as a medical student. I was a trainee at the University of Adelaide in 1966. We had the Australian Medical Students' Conference here in Melbourne. And my first view of the Alfred Lecture Theatre was to hear a lecture on sleep medicine. Now, to me, sleep before that time was the state that you were in when you were not awake. New terms were introduced to me like rapid eye movement sleep and non-REM sleep. I don't remember who the lecturer was, but when recently talking to Matt Norton, who's head of sleep medicine here, Matt thought it was something to do with the Department of Surgery, not medicine, the research in that time, and Jock Masterton, who was a burn surgeon, was involved in sleep medicine. Now, for a new appointee to a chair of medicine, the prospect can seem quite daunting. What big shoes, or should I say, what a big chair to fill, especially with the previous occupant being such a giant figure as Barry Firkin. Thus, in my mind, when I began the job, this is what it seemed ahead of me. Big chair, but very small figure. So why did I title the talk From the Ridiculous to the Sublime? The actual chair that I was undertaking when I started was a little bit more of a stool of medicine. And by stool, I don't mean a gastroenterological definition of a stool. The department over the previous year had actually been decimated following the move of most of the department to Box Hill Hospital. It's no secret at that time that there had been a significant fallout between the faculty and the Alfred. In 1993, the department was composed of one full-time Monash-funded academic, that was me, compared to the 6 or 7 that we heard from Hatton in the early days of the department. 3 part-time academic staff, including Peter Ryan and Max Schwartz. A full-time research officer, Ian Sloan, who was no longer engaged in research but was engaged in information technology. And a laboratory whose entire equipment was a water still, fixed to the wall because it couldn't be transported to Box Hill. And a laboratory which was in desperate need of refurbishment. However, on the other hand, and quite seriously, although decimated in terms of staffing and laboratories, the department had considerable support from many other sources, support which was fundamental to its resurgence. Peter Ryan had looked after the shop for almost 2 years as acting head of the department on a very part-time basis, and was fundamental in maintaining its teaching programs, the links with the Alfred, and this was very much supported by part-time academics such as Max Schwartz and Martin van der Weyden. And also Jim Stockett, Gary Jennings, Alan McLean and Bob McClellan, Nick Christophides and Charlie Varley at Caulfield. Many other full-time and VMOs, and of course John Thunder was then the director of the Baker. Equally, there was great support from the other university departments on the site, both from their heads and their staff. Although wet lab research had largely disappeared from the department, the Alfred remained a highly sought-after place by medical students, supported so strongly by the clinicians of the Alfred in Caulfield, and the clinical school then led by Mike Oldmeadow, and the many tutors of the department, especially supporting the 4th and 6th year programs. In those days, it was a 6-year course. Tutors such as Michael Hall, you're correct, Stephen, a young respiratory physician who tragically died from influenza while undertaking further studies in the North America. India Rajaratnam, a budding young rheumatologist, and a young senior lecturer called Christine Mitchell, our current dean, who as a senior lecturer had relocated to Box Hill, but was still prepared to commute over to the Alfred to teach. Time prevents the mentioning of the many, many other clinical teachers at the Department of Medicine, and particularly myself, were very grateful. Barry Firkin's long-time PA, Marilyn Bush, had happily stayed in the department when Barry left and remained a great support to the department until her retirement in 2008. Despite the difficult relationships between the Alfred, and it did take me 3 weeks to get an appointment to meet the Chief Executive Officer, the Alfred had, however, pioneered conjoint hospital and university appointments, professor-director positions. The first being Nick Christofides, who was appointed as head of aged care at Caulfield in 1992, funded by the Department of Health, followed by the first professor-director of respiratory medicine, that was Hayden Walters, who came from the United Kingdom. And although not in the Department of Medicine, but in the Department of Surgery, Alan Roger from Scotland was appointed Professor-Director of Radiation Oncology. And importantly, before I arrived, the faculty recognised the considerable academic contributions to the faculty of John Funder, the then Director of the Baker, Gary Jennings, head of the ABMU, and Alan McLean, the Alfred's head of clinical pharmacology, and appointed all three as honorary professors in the department. Appreciating the loss of the department's laboratories, research and very old laboratory infrastructure, the then Dean Bob Porter did find funding to renew the department. Any of us who worked in the old medical school building will remember the very warm welcome you would get from the attendants on the front desk, and particularly from Clive. Clive would greet you almost crying out, "Wonderful to see you this morning!" Clive was there for many years, and it wasn't until his mid-80s that he actually retired from the position. I'd like now to address a little bit about the developments of the department over the 18 years in the areas of teaching, research, clinical service, the physical facilities, and very importantly, the progressive Monash integration, to give you a picture of the department's growth and successes over those years. Undergraduate medical education and experience has always been of great quality here, and there's no doubt about that. It's highly sought after by the medical students and still is. The commitment and the quality of our clinical teachers is undoubted. The value of teaching and research was also strongly supported by Alfred Health, with clear recognition in the Alfred Health employment contracts for senior medical staff that teaching and research are part and parcel of senior medical staff appointments. In 1993, there were about 7 postgraduate research students registered through the department, largely undertaking research in the Alfred's clinical departments or in the Baker. But by 2010, the number of postgraduate research students was about 60, reflecting the considerable expansion of research within the department itself, the Alfred and the affiliated research institutes. What about research? Well, the nature and spectrum of research to be undertaken in any university department is determined by many factors, including opportunity, funding, expertise, and in the case of clinical departments, the potential to link with the clinical services of affiliated healthcare institutions. Today is a symposium on translational research, and clearly this is the ultimate objective of most basic biological and clinical research, be it the identification of genes and their products, regulators of biological and physiological functions, development of potential therapeutic agents, or research into health services. However, not all human biological or physiological research has to have an immediate or even short-term translational potential, but ultimately may lead to some benefit to the human condition. So one of the questions the department had to address in 1993 was, what should its research plans be? Should all its potential research be allowed to be sown, with the potential that some seed will fall on stony ground, as shown in the middle there, and produce nothing? Or some will result in a significant research flowering, as in the foreground, but not of international standing? But some may lead to extensive flowering, which supersedes the flowering in all the other areas, and then can be further supported. One can argue that this is the role of a university as opposed to a research institute, which usually confines its research to a specific area of medicine. An alternative approach is to focus all your resources in very few areas, and which are determined by track record and funding. A flowering unique to this country and the envy of the world may be the result. I recently thought that the Sturt Desert Pea could be an excellent emblem for the school's Australian Centre for Blood Diseases. So what was the Department of Medicine's plan in 1993? The answer is it didn't deliberately say we will do X, Y and Z, but we agreed that the best way forward was to develop programs complementary to the Alfred's clinical services. In facilitating this, integration of the Department of Medicine with the Alfred's clinical services was to be fundamental and a continuation of what we've heard about Barry's initial activities. By integration, I mean encouraging and facilitating all staff to be actively involved in research, education and clinical service, and health sector and university leadership, no matter who their paymaster is. By making wet and dry laboratory space available to all and providing honorary academic appointments at the appropriate academic level. As mentioned earlier, the Department of Medicine's wet laboratories in the medical school were basically unusable in 1993. There were some departments that did have some wet laboratories, endocrinology and clinical pharmacology. So the refurbishment of the laboratories on the 5th and 6th floor of the medical school building was undertaken later that year. The official opening of the refurbished laboratories was undertaken by Jessica Fairley, the then one-year-old daughter of Flavia Ciccottini, now head of rheumatology and a professor in the School of Public Health, and Kit Fairley, who, on the left of the picture, now a professor of sexual health medicine. Jessica has followed in her parents' footsteps and is currently an intern here at the Alfred. The laboratories initially housed the research programs of the Alfred's Department of Respiratory Medicine, which was headed by Hayden Walters and John Wilson, and the research program of my own group, looking at the immunoinflammatory mechanisms of chronic renal injury and glomerulonephritis and allograft rejection. The co-location with the Alfred's clinical services of cardiac and lung transplantation were a bit of a mecca and led to a productive program of research into allograft rejection and renal disease in lung transplantation. The refurbished laboratories allowed the development of programs into inflammatory arthritis, led by Peter Ryan. When Henry Krum arrived at the Alfred, he established a program in experimental heart failure. Elston Story's appointment to the Van Cleef Wright Chair of Neuroscience, and Robin O'Hare's appointment as Professor Director of Allergy and Clinical Immunology, and Steve Wesling as the first appointee to the Professor Director of Infectious Diseases, research space became a real issue. And their research only became possible through the school's Department of Immunology and the hospital itself, allowing some spillover. Andrew Spencer's wet laboratory program followed. The construction of the new wet labs on the second floor of the new South Block and the labs for infectious diseases and neuroscience on level 3 of the new Burnett and the 6th floor for blood diseases allowed the recruitment of Leon Bark's endocrinology group from the University of Melbourne and for the long desired return of Hatton and the Centre for Blood Diseases after 15 years away in the wilderness of Box Hill. In 2010, the department received about $10 million in that year in research funding, so quite a dramatic improvement over the years. I must thank the many people who led and participated in these research programs. I'd particularly like to acknowledge my close colleague, Dr. Alicia Stein, the enormous amount of work she undertook over the 20 or more years that she worked with me. It was Alicia who really ran my renal and transplant research programs, coordinated the usage and the development of all the wet labs, and supervised the many postgraduate research students. What I've described to date is the wet lab-based research developments, but running in parallel was the complementary clinical and translational research programs, reflecting the clinical services of the Alfred. As I'll demonstrate, these programs of research were very much Monash and Alfred working closely together. In 1993, there was not a great deal of integration, although it had started, as we've heard from Hatton, with the establishment of the Professor Director positions and the expansion of the Honorary Adjunct University academic appointments. Then by 2010, 15 of the subspecialty clinical services in medicine within Alfred Health were led by appointees of full professorial status, the remaining 3 heads being associate professor level. In addition, within these clinical services, there were at least 10 other clinicians with adjunct professorial appointments, and of course many associate professor and senior lecturers. The consequence has been the attraction to the Alfred of clinical leaders in medicine and other physicians of outstanding quality, many with a very significant national and international reputation. Most of them are still working at the Alfred, or they've retired, or have been appointed to other prestigious positions. Hayden Walters was appointed to the Chair of Medicine at the University of Tasmania. Steve Wesling, who was the first Professor Director of Infectious Diseases, became the Director of the Burnett, and then became my boss when he was appointed as Dean of the Faculty. And 3 years ago became the inaugural Director of the New South Australian Health and Medical Research Institute, and it's great that Steve will be talking to us today. Sharon Lewin, who succeeded Steve in the Professor Director position of Infectious Diseases, left last year to become the Director of the new Doherty Research Institute. I should also mention the development of the new Professorial General Medical Unit. It had gone by the time I had arrived, and the then 3 small general medical units at the Alfred agreed to combine to become the Professorial General Medical Unit under my leadership and with great support from Bob McClellan. I was very indebted to the 3 heads of the units, of the other units then, that's John McNeil, Peter Habsburger and Gary Jennings. The establishment of the PGMU not only allowed the Alfred to better position itself for the progressive increase of the need for general internal medicine services, but by its academic nature, the PGMU became a great resource for undergraduate teaching of our MBBS students. It grew so rapidly that it became clearly beyond my resources to continue to lead it, and in 2008 we appointed Harvey Newnham as its director. And now the General Medical Unit, as it's called, is the largest clinical service in medicine for Alfred Health under Harvey's excellent leadership. In 1993, the Department of Medicine was housed in the part of the 5th and 6th floors of the medical school, here shown. We had half of the 6th floor sharing with epidemiology and preventive medicine, with some lab spaces on the 5th floor, where the Department of Surgery was accommodated. As John McNeil's department was rapidly expanding, it moved to 2 floors of the American Consulate building on St Kilda Road, allowing medicine to expand. What luxury. Laboratory space remained an issue, so following a personal approach to the then Chief Finance Officer of Monash, Peter Wade, $5 million was allocated by the university as a Monash contribution to the development of new teaching and research infrastructure. And a consortium was developed between Alfred, Monash, the Baker and Burnett. The Burnett was then housed at the old Fairfield Hospital site, to plan 3 new buildings. The new South Block to house a combined library, teaching space, 2 floors of wet labs for Monash, a new Baker building, and a building to house the Burnett when it was relocated. But including in that building was a floor for epidemiology and preventive medicine and labs for infectious diseases and neuroscience. This was AMREP Stage 1. The planning and construction group met every Tuesday morning for 1.5 hours for about 120 weeks till completion of Stage 1, by which time I learned an enormous amount about designing, planning and building, but clearly not enough to give up the day job. Michael Walsh, the then CEO of Alfred, superbly led that group, and Graham Ryan, the Director of Research for the Alfred and an adjunct professor in the Department of Medicine, coordinated the 4 partners beautifully. Phase 2 followed with the building of the, on the top of the new Alfred Centre of 2 floors to house the teaching, research and administration for medicine, surgery and the ever-expanding School of Public Health. As mentioned earlier, the relationship between the Alfred and the Monash was not great in 1993. However, since then there has been progressive and far-reaching mutual recognition, integration and mutual respect, leading to the excellent collaborative partnership I think we have today. This applies to not just medicine, but all areas of the school. The integration has come through great support from leadership of Alfred Health and Monash, but also strong support from those involved in teaching, research and education. I must pay tribute to the 4 CEOs of the Alfred over this time. Bill Cricker, who with the then Dean Bob Porter established the first Professor Director positions. Michael Walsh, who provided superb leadership and support for the academic developments over his 8 years as CEO. Jennifer Williams, who consolidated the integration, and Andrew Way, the current CEO, who's taken relationships between Alfred Health and Monash to a new height. Graham Ryan, Alfred Hospital's first Director of Research, Andrew Stripp, the Chief Operating Officer, and Lee Hambley, the Chief Medical Officer, have also been very supportive. When Michael Walsh began work here as the CEO of the Alfred, he came to meet me at my office, when really I should have gone to his office. He said to me that the future of the Alfred was Monash University, and that the future of the Monash faculty was the Alfred. He also said that the future of the Alfred was research. This was what a great foundation for Monash-Alfred integration. I must acknowledge the enormous support from all 4 deans over this time: Bob Porter, Nick Saunders, Ed Byrne, Steve Wesling, as well as the 4 Monash Vice-Chancellors over that time: Mal Logan, David Robinson, Richard Larkins and Ed Byrne. I must admit it's been very helpful for a Department of Medicine to have had over that time 3 deans and 2 Vice-Chancellors who were physicians and clearly understood the health system and the way a Department of Medicine operates and the great value of integration between the university and the health sector. By 2010, the Department of Medicine and the Alfred were functioning very strongly as a team in the provision of teaching, research and clinical care at an early stage of even integration at the level of governance. Clearly the department was no longer at the ridiculous level, but on the track to the level of sublime. What do I mean by sublime? I feel it's a fully integrated academic health science centre, and looking ahead from when I stood down, the development of Monash Partners is another step towards the sublime. As I approach retirement from the chair, in Monash University professors have to retire at 45 years of age, succession planning got underway, planning which involved both the faculty and the Alfred. The objective was to attract a young, vigorous clinical academic of national and international standing to be head of medicine and the school, and to also be responsible for leadership of research for both the school and Alfred Health. And 18 months later, Steve arrived, and what a great appointment it's turned out to be. My last slide. In this photo you see a more relaxed, retiring head of medicine on the right of the chair of medicine. The person on the left represents the youth, vigour and optimism of the department's new leadership. The young man is not Steve as a child, but my youngest grandchild Spencer. And maybe, Stephen, he may one day be your successor. Thank you.